Ever step into the shower first thing in the morning, get about 4 minutes of decent hot water, and then suddenly you're standing there, getting hit with cold water, wondering what happened? Maybe you're running the dishwasher and somebody turns on the bathroom sink and all of a sudden, nobody's got hot water. I hear this one all the time, and here's what drives me crazy about it. Most people assume their water heater is dying. They start shopping for a new one, looking at $1,500, $2,000. But 9 times out of 10, the fix costs you absolutely nothing. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly why your hot water runs out so fast and show you how to fix it yourself, step by step. And stick around to the end, because I've got a bonus tip that'll squeeze more hot water out of your existing tank without spending a single dime. All right, let's get into it. Running out of hot water is one of the most common complaints homeowners have, and it's also one of the most misunderstood. Folks assume it's a big, expensive problem, when most of the time it comes down to a handful of simple things you can check and fix yourself in an afternoon. Once you understand how your water heater actually does its job, the solution usually becomes pretty obvious. So let's start right there. Your water heater, whether it's gas or electric, works on a pretty simple principle. You've got a tank, usually somewhere between 30 and 50 gallons for most homes, and inside that tank there's either a gas burner at the bottom or one or two electric heating elements. Cold water comes into the tank through a pipe called the dip tube, which runs down to the bottom of the tank. That's important, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. The burner or the elements heat that water up to whatever temperature your thermostat is set to, and then the hot water sits there in the tank, waiting for you to use it. When you turn on a hot water faucet anywhere in the house, hot water gets pushed out from the top of the tank, and fresh cold water flows in through the dip tube at the bottom to replace it. Now here's the thing most people don't realize. Your water heater doesn't make hot water instantly. It heats a fixed amount of water and stores it. Once you use up what's in the tank, you have to wait for the new cold water to heat back up. That's called recovery time. And depending on your setup, it can take anywhere from 20 minutes to over an hour. So when your hot water runs out fast, something is either reducing the amount of hot water available in your tank, or it's preventing the tank from heating properly in the first place. Let's figure out which one it is. The very first thing I want you to check is your thermostat setting, because this is the easiest fix, and I'm always amazed how often this turns out to be the culprit. On a gas water heater, your thermostat is that dial on the front of the gas control valve near the bottom of the tank. On an electric water heater, you've actually got two thermostats, an upper and a lower, hidden behind access panels on the side of the tank. Most manufacturers set these to 120 degrees Fahrenheit at the factory, and that's the recommended setting for most households. But here's what happens. Somebody bumps that dial. A repair person adjusts it and forgets to set it back. Or maybe the previous homeowner turned it down to save on their energy bill and never mentioned it. If your thermostat is sitting at 100 degrees or even 110, your water is going to feel lukewarm a whole lot faster than it should. What I want you to do is go check that setting right now. Well, after the video. If it's below 120 degrees, turn it up to 120. Don't go above 130, because above that, you're getting into scalding territory. Especially dangerous if you've got grandkids running around the house. On an electric unit, you'll need to shut off the breaker before you pull those access panels off. There's line voltage behind there, and I'm not going to let you get hurt over a thermostat check. Use a flathead screwdriver to adjust both thermostats. Set the upper and the lower to the same temperature. Then button everything back up and flip the breaker back on. Give the tank about an hour to recover, and then test your hot water at the kitchen faucet. You'd be surprised how many times this one simple check solves the whole problem. It costs you nothing and takes about 5 minutes. Now, if your thermostat was already set where it should be, the next thing we need to look at is sediment. And I'll tell you, this is the big one. This is the fix. that solves the problem for more homeowners than anything else I know of. Over time, minerals in your water, mostly calcium and magnesium, settle out and drop to the bottom of your tank. It builds up layer after layer, year after year, and if you've never flushed your water heater, you could have several inches of hardite sediment caked down there. Now think about what that does. If you've got a 40-gallon tank and 3 or 4 gallons worth of sediment packed on the bottom, you don't have a 40-gallon tank anymore. You've got a 36-gallon tank, and that sediment is sitting right on top of the burner on a gas unit, which means the burner has to work harder to heat water through all that crud. On an electric unit, the lower heating element can actually get buried in sediment and stop working altogether. I worked on a tank once where the homeowner told me it hadn't been flushed in 11 years. What came out of that drain valve looked like wet cement. Here's how you flush it, and take your time on this one because you're dealing with very hot water. First, turn off the heat source. For gas, turn the dial to the pilot setting. For electric, flip the breaker off. Do not skip this step. Heating an empty or partially empty tank will burn out your elements or crack the tank lining, and then you really do need a new water heater. Next, hook up a standard garden hose to the drain valve at the bottom of your tank. That valve looks like a regular hose bib, usually brass or plastic. Run the other end of the hose to a floor drain, a sump pit, or outside the house if you can reach. Now open a hot water faucet somewhere in the house. Any faucet will do, just leave it running. This breaks the vacuum inside the tank so it can drain properly. Then open that drain valve. The first time you do this on a tank that's never been flushed, what comes out is going to look like muddy river water. Don't let that alarm you. That's exactly what we want to see coming out. Let it run until the water clears up. If the flow slows to a trickle, sediment is probably clogging the drain valve. Close the valve, let pressure build back up for about a minute, then crack it open again. That little burst of pressure usually breaks the clog loose. Once the water runs clear, close the drain valve, remove the hose, close the faucet you opened upstairs, and let the tank fill back up completely. You'll know it's full when that upstairs faucet starts flowing steadily again with no air sputtering out. Then, and only then, turn your heat source back on. I've seen homeowners flush out a tank and tell me it felt like they got a brand new water heater. Same tank, same age, just without all that garbage sitting on the bottom. And it didn't cost them a single dollar, just a garden hose and about 30 minutes of patience. If your knees give you trouble getting down to floor level, and believe me, I understand that, pull up a 5-gallon bucket or a short stool and sit on it. There's no trophy for suffering through this. By the way, if you're finding this advice helpful, do me a small favor and hit that subscribe button down below. I put out new videos like this one every week, walking you through repairs that'll save you a small fortune in plumber bills. Subscribing is free, and it's the best way to make sure you don't miss the next one. All right, let's continue. This next one is something most homeowners have never even heard of, but it's one of the most common reasons a water heater seems to suddenly stop producing enough hot water. I'm talking about the dip tube. Remember earlier when I explained that cold water enters your tank through a tube that runs all the way down to the bottom? That's the dip tube. Its whole job is to push incoming cold water to the bottom of the tank, so it doesn't mix with the hot water sitting up at the top, ready to be used. When the dip tube cracks or breaks off, and they do break because most of them are made of plastic, cold water starts dumping in right at the top of the tank instead of the bottom. That cold water mixes directly with your stored hot water, and suddenly, a full tank of hot water feels like half a tank or less. Here's how to check it. Shut off the cold water supply valve to the tank. Then disconnect the cold water inlet fitting on top of the heater. That's the pipe on the right side if you're facing the front of most tanks, but always check for a blue ring or blue marking to be sure you've got the right one. Once you pull that fitting, you should be able to look down into the opening or carefully pull the dip tube straight out. It's just sitting in there, held in by the fitting above it. If it's cracked, broken in half, or significantly shorter than the depth of the tank, that's your problem right there. A new dip tube costs about $8 to $10 at any hardware store, and it slides right back into place. The whole repair takes maybe 20 minutes once you've got the part. Now, if your water heater is getting up past 12 or 15 years old and the dip tube has completely disintegrated, you might find little white plastic flakes clogging up the aerators on faucets throughout the house. If you unscrew an aerator and find white plastic crumbles in the screen, you know exactly what happened. All right, the next thing I want you to check for is something called a crossed connection. And between you and me, this one drives plumbers absolutely crazy because it's so tricky to track down if you don't know what you're looking for. A crossed connection happens when cold water sneaks into your hot water line through a fixture somewhere in the house. The most common culprit is a single-handle faucet or a single-handle shower valve. These mixing valves blend hot and cold water internally, and when the cartridge inside one of them gets worn out or starts failing, it can allow cold water to backfeed into the hot water line, even when that faucet is completely turned off. So every time you run hot water somewhere else in the house, cold water is quietly bleeding in through that bad cartridge and watering down your supply. Here's a simple way to test for it. Turn off the cold water supply to your water heater at the valve above the tank. Then, go open a hot water faucet and let it run for a minute or two. Once the tank pressure drops, the flow should stop completely. If water keeps dribbling out after it should have stopped, you've got cold water feeding into the hot side from somewhere. Now start isolating your single-handle fixtures one at a time. Go under each sink and shut off the supply valves. Then retest until the backfeed stops. When it stops, the last fixture you shut off is your culprit. Replacing a faucet cartridge is a straightforward job. Usually takes about 30 minutes, and the part runs anywhere from $15 to $30, depending on the brand. Now let's talk about something that doesn't require a single tool, and that's being smart about how and when you use your hot water. I've seen families run the dishwasher, throw in a load of laundry on the hot cycle, and then wonder why there's nothing left for a shower. Your tank can only hold so much, and it can only recover so fast. A standard 40-gallon gas water heater recovers at roughly 40 gallons per hour. Not bad. An electric unit of the same size? More like 20 to 25 gallons per hour. That's a real difference, and it matters when everybody in the house wants hot water at the same time. What I recommend is staggering your hot water usage. Run the dishwasher, then wait 20 to 30 minutes before somebody jumps in the shower. Don't run 2 hot water appliances simultaneously if you can avoid it. And if mornings are a battleground in your house, figure out who needs hot water first and space things out by 15 or 20 minutes. This alone can make it feel like your water heater doubled in capacity, and it doesn't cost you a thing except a little planning. Let's talk about some common problems you might run into and how to handle them. First one is the water gets warm, but doesn't ever get truly hot. If you've already checked the thermostat and flushed the tank, look at the lower heating element on an electric unit. These elements burn out, and when the lower one goes, you lose about half your heating capacity. Testing it with a multimeter is simple, and a replacement element costs about $15. Second thing I see is water that's nice and hot at the kitchen faucet, but lukewarm in the master bathroom. That usually means you've got a long pipe run between the tank and that far bathroom, and the water is losing heat as it travels through 50 or 60 feet of cold pipe. Insulating your hot water pipes with foam pipe insulation makes a real difference. A bag of foam sleeves costs about $5 and slides right over the pipe. You can do a whole house in an afternoon. Third one is the water heater, making popping or rumbling sounds. That's almost always sediment. When you've got a thick layer baked onto the bottom of a gas water heater, the burner creates steam bubbles that percolate up through it. That's the popping and crackling you hear. Flushing the tank usually takes care of it completely. Fourth issue is a rotten egg smell coming only from the hot water side. That's caused by bacteria reacting with the anode rod inside the tank. The anode rod is a sacrificial metal rod designed to corrode so your tank doesn't. When it breaks down past a certain point, it produces hydrogen sulfide gas. Replacing the anode rod costs about $20 to $30, and you pull it out from the top of the tank with a 1 1/16 inch socket on a breaker bar. Fair warning, after a few years of corrosion, they can be stubborn to break loose. Fifth problem is the pilot light on a gas unit that keeps going out every few days. That's usually a failing thermocouple, which is the small sensor that sits in the pilot flame and signals the gas valve to stay open. A new thermocouple costs $10 to $15, threads into the gas control valve, and clips into the pilot assembly. Most homeowners can handle this one without calling anyone. The good news is, if you follow the steps we've already covered, you'll dodge most of these headaches before they ever show up. All right, now for that bonus tip I promised you at the beginning, and this one is genuinely free. Your water heater doesn't run constantly. It cycles on and off throughout the day, based on the temperature of the water inside the tank. Every time it fires up, it has to overcome something called standby heat loss, which is the heat that naturally escapes through the walls of the tank while it just sits there between uses. Here's the trick. If you know you're going to need a lot of hot water, maybe you've got company coming for the weekend, or the whole family is home for the holidays, turn the thermostat up to 130 degrees about 45 minutes before the heavy usage starts. That gives the tank time to heat the water a bit hotter than normal, which means it can blend with more cold water at the faucet before it starts feeling lukewarm. You effectively get more usable hot water out of the exact same tank. Just remember to turn it back down to 120 when the rush is over. My Uncle Ray used to do this every Thanksgiving when we had 20 people showing up and one bathroom to share. Worked like a charm every single time, and it didn't cost him a penny. Before you go, if you got something out of this video, do me one last favor and hit that subscribe button. I put out new videos every week covering real-world plumbing repairs, money-saving tips, and the kind of know-how that takes years to pick up on the job. Subscribing costs you nothing, and it makes sure these videos show up in your feed when you need them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. That's how my Uncle Ray taught me, and that's how I'm teaching you.